Our guest speaker for this evening is Guy Amato. He's a retired business executive with a background in networking technology, commercial real estate development, higher education, and the former CEO of Habitat for Humanity Las Vegas, a nonprofit organization that builds affordable housing for working families. During his tenure, Habitat secured a 10-year supply of developable land, housed over 50 families, and opened the successful Habitat Restore franchise. In the past 10 years, Guy held an administration position at the College of Southern Nevada. He retired recently in January 2021 as the Director of Inclusive Learning, responsible for the operational development of the Promise Scholarship Program, which provided full scholarships to thousands of students, and the high school early college program, which delivered college courses to over 8,000 students every year. A lifelong musician, Guy pursued a music career as a guitarist parallel to his business career. His musical pursuits led him to appreciate the diverse cultural environment around him by learning and playing in various genres including blues, gospel, rock, jazz, Brazilian, classical, and country music. Guy actually also performed at the Monterey Blues Festival in 2010, performed regularly at the House of Blues in Las Vegas, and participated in the Silver State Gospel Workshop for 2 years. This past year, he finished a second term as a board trustee for the Las Vegas Blues Society. Guy is married to Kim, founder and president emeritus of Baby's Bounty, a nonprofit organization that provides free essential gear and supplies for infants born into poverty, and which operates the largest diaper bank in Nevada. Originally from New York, Kim and Guy have resided in Nevada for 29 years and have 2 adult children, a married daughter, Gabrielle, and their first grandchild, Lucia, and soon-to-be-married son, Victor. So without further ado, I am proud and so glad you accepted the invitation to serve as our guest speaker, Guy Amato.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I really do appreciate it. I'm very honored to be speaking tonight. What a terrific tribute to these fathers. The value and the energy in this room is contagious. That's really quite remarkable. I met Anthony 6 years ago, actually through my wife's organization, and we came to the second annual dinner here. And it just gets better every year. What a remarkable achievement you and your board have been able to provide for our community, so I appreciate that. We haven't really maintained contact in those 6 years or so. And what brings me here today is strange and auspicious and almost magical. And I'd like to share that with you before I even get started. My dad died 32 years ago at the age of 66. And since his death, I've only dreamed about him maybe 3 or 4 times. And each of those times, it was actually pretty frightening. There were more nightmares than dreams. And I wasn't sure why. I was afraid to see him. I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed. My wife told me I would be twitching in the bed and moaning, and she would have to wake me up. She didn't know it was wrong. And again, I don't know why I dreamed that. About a month ago, though, I had another dream about him. I was walking into the bar area of the restaurant, and the man in front of me turned around. He was my father. He had a big smile across that big broad face of his, and a martini in his hand. This time, I was really overjoyed to see him. I could finally speak to him. I said, "Dad, what are you doing here? It's great to see you. I love you. I miss you. But you don't belong here." And then I woke up. But this time I felt real joy having seen him, having been able to say something to him, to acknowledge him. I went back to a rather restful sleep. The very next morning the phone rang. It was Anthony. whom I haven't spoken to in 6 years, invited me to speak about fatherhood tonight. Things don't happen by coincidence. Things happen for a reason, and the opportunity forces me to review my life with my father, to finally come to terms with him, which I seem to have avoided all of this time. It also helped me understand some of the issues and conflicts I'm having with my own son. Preparing for this talk, at first I thought it would be based on what Anthony had asked me to do, just, what are some influences with your dad, how did it affect your career? But I think it turned out to be a lot more than that. It was really about coming to terms with my father's influence, the conflicts, the misunderstandings, the love, the support that helped shape me. And also come to terms with my own role as a father, with my own son, with my influence, the conflicts, the misunderstandings, and the love and the support. I found an interesting quote, I think, that sums it up probably for all of us as fathers and as sons. Every father should remember that one day his son will follow his example, not his advice. That was from Charles Ketter, and he was an automotive executive. He invented the starter car. It's probably a fairly famous quote to understand. What is passed from father to son? It's genetic and physical traits, expressions of personality, family relationships, behavior patterns, cultural influences, legacies to perpetuate, and in some cases, legacies to overcome. I can't address all of these things. That would be about a year's worth of therapy sessions for me to do that much. But let me share some positive highlights of life with my father. His father, my grandfather, left a small village in southern Italy in 1910 at the age of 24 and migrated to America. What is the drive of a wanderlust and the motivation that causes one to leave a home and a history of untold generations and travel to a foreign land, in a foreign country where he knows no one, doesn't speak the language, thinking it's going to be better? He came with his skill. He was a barber. He started a family and had a reasonably good life, if not a difficult life. I remember he and my father argued constantly. I was too young to understand, but that frustration at some unmet number of expectations he may have had for his life and his children would reappear in my father at a point later in his life, and it caused conflicts between us, and the pattern repeats with my son and me. Conflicts between father and son are biblical. It seems to be a natural part of perpetuating generations. The drive to move on, seek better opportunities, is a genetic trait, a cultural one, is it a legacy we model for subsequent generations to endure or embrace? My father was born and raised during the Depression, came of age during World War II, joined the Army Air Corps, served, came home from the war and attended night school to get his high school diploma, and he went to work. He started a family and was determined, like many of that generation, that his children would have all the things he didn't have as a child. We were spoiled. He was also motivated to gain acceptance and to overcome the prejudice he experienced as an Italian immigrant. And those were real in those days. Noble in its intent and highly charged motivator, it drove him to work hard, overcome obstacles and disappointments, and succeed. Clearly defined his life path. He worked as a machinist for small defense and aerospace companies on Long Island. He continued his education at night and eventually became a manufacturing engineer. And he worked hard to advance his skills and increasing responsibilities. That wanderlust of his father that brought him to this country also drove him. He changed jobs constantly. Some for better opportunities, sometimes because he was laid off. My mother, on the other hand, worked for the same company for 34 years. He was an attentive and loving father, and he exuded unbounded enthusiasm for everything he did, because if he couldn't be all in, he just wouldn't get involved. I can't tell you how many half-finished projects there were around the house over the years because he lost interest. But when he was in, he was all in. It was great. He was also a very stern and harsh disciplinarian with a violent temper. In that way, he was very much like his father. Though I believe he tried hard not to be his father. Something about that legacy seems to endure across generations. Some genetic, life circumstances, learned behavior, or as some of the old Italians believed, somebody had put an evil eye on me. I'll give you an example where that disciplinarian, would tell us something and would change our behavior, but not because he told us. I grew up with two other brothers, three boys in the family, and we were just very close in age. And when we would go out to a restaurant when we were small, before we left the car, he would turn around at the back seat and tell us, behave, don't act up, no yelling, just mind your manners, because God help you if I have to yell at you in the restaurant. I mean, you've been there, you know. So we would go in, and the first time we were like, oh, we're going to not do anything. We sat there like three angels. At one point, and this happened several times, someone would come up to the table and introduce himself to my father and say, your sons are so very well behaved. I wanted to just compliment you. And after the first time that happened, he never had to say anything about when we went to a restaurant, because we wanted to make my father proud. We wanted him to feel that he was worthy of all of us being in that restaurant. It was really part of, when we come out of the Italian ghetto in the city, we used to call people like us like a certain name. He wasn't pretty, but his favorite word was uncouth. He didn't want to be looked at like we were uncouth. And that was the first time I really changed my behavior for a positive reason, not because I was getting yelled at. There are values that are shared with my father that are part of my identity. There are influences that cause me to act the same way, and those that cause me not to do the same things. And most influenced by his work ethic, driven by the immigrant experience, unafraid of changing jobs, looking for new opportunities, making money, earning everything through hard work, and working smart. It was unsaid, being accepted as worthy and valued was as important. Wanting the pride of being someone. No matter where we went, we always ran into somebody who knew my father. It's not about what your dad says. It's like the Charlie Brown cartoons where the adults in the thing are just wow, that's wrong, right? He would yell, do your homework, clean your room, cut the grass, take out the garbage. He wouldn't show me how to do it, he'd just yell at me to do it. So I rarely did any of these ever if he wasn't there. But what he was strict about was what he could control, and that was getting me off to school every morning. He would come downstairs to my bedroom, and reach under the covers and grab me by the big toe and drag my leg off the bed and yell, get up! And there was no room for hesitation. You got up, there was no rolling over. My dad didn't have a snooze alarm. So you got up and you went to school for the full day, every day. I didn't know there was such a thing as a sick day until I was in my late 30s and had a full-time job. It's what Dad did that had the biggest influence on us, and I don't know that he ever realized it. I really don't. I certainly hope he did, but maybe now he does. A very vivid thing happened, a disappointment my father endured, when I was still just starting college. And I realized at the time it was a big deal, but I didn't know how much it would mean to me until years later when I reflected back from a somewhat similar situation, which I've had more than once. He and my mother had been planning a trip to Europe for several years. They finally had the resources and the time to realize that goal. They were to fly to Europe for a 3-week excursion at the capitals, London, Paris, Rome, and Madrid. Scheduled to leave on a Sunday afternoon, my father got called into his boss's office that Friday afternoon and was laid off from his engineering job. They went to Europe anyway. That was my father. He said, tickets to all were going. He had a mortgage, he had me in college, 2 of my brothers in high school right behind me, all the bills and financial obligations of a typical middle-class family. He went to Europe as planned and had a wonderful time. He came back from the trip, and I remember the week he got back, that Monday morning, he was sitting at the kitchen table reading the one ads in the newspaper. This is long before the internet. He swallowed his pride, and it was during the recession. The defense industry on the East Coast was up and down, all through the 70s. He finally got an outside sales job selling steel and metal to machine shops, which he had some knowledge about because he was a machinist. But he took a huge step back in his career and his pride to being an engineer in the aerospace industry, to a territory sales rep, working for a company out of the Bronx, drive all through the metropolitan New York area every day. He took the job because he needed the job. There was no question about whether or not he was going to go to work. And he needed to go to work within a week of returning from Europe. And he did. And he went out and was a commissioned salesman and started relearning and re-earning a living. But like my dad, he always found an opportunity. By going to these machine shops, he got relationships with people, and he understood the machinery they used, and these new computer system machines were coming out, and he understood how it worked because he was a manufacturing engineer and knew the processes. And he landed a job with a big distributor in the East Coast, and his career took off, and to the point where he was a leading salesman in the United States, and Japan, and Italy. He had a wonderful career. And it came because he just would not give up. And he took whatever responsibilities he had seriously, and he went out and did the things he had to do with enthusiasm. His favorite expression, and it ended up being the mantra of my life, because he would never let us forget it: the world doesn't owe you a living. And you have to work hard and earn everything you have. And I live by that every day. I'm still trying to convince my 30-year-old son the same thing. He also had an indirect influence, and it was unintentional, and I think he came to regret it at some point. But we always had music in the house. And when I was a small kid, he actually had a guitar. He took guitar lessons for a while just as a hobby. And he used to keep the guitar case under the bed. And when I was 9 years old, I was fascinated by that. And when they went out, I would sneak into the bedroom, because you weren't allowed in their bedroom when they were out there. And I would take the guitar out and put it on the bed and open the case. And it just fascinated me. The smell of it, the touch of it, the strings, the lines, I was 9 years old when I touched my first guitar. I've never put it down. I've played guitar my entire life. It's the only thing in my life I've ever done consistently, uninterrupted, the whole time. To the point where I went out and tried to make a living as a professional musician after college. That's an Italian immigrant from Brooklyn. That was not a good idea. I never said that. So, and I'll just give this example in terms of the generational differences. When my dad was listening, we listened to opera during Sunday dinner, because that's what he did. But he was a Frank Sinatra guy, and he Martin guy, and stuff like that. And I was listening to Led Zeppelin, Cream, and my father said, "Why is that guy screaming? I can't understand any of the lyrics." And I vowed then, I said, when I'm a father and I have a kid, I'm not going to make fun of their music. I'm not going to put them down for their music. I don't understand what's going on in popular music today. We watched the Grammys a few weeks ago, and I go, I don't know any of these people, and what is that guy singing about? I can't understand the lyrics. And my son-in-law looked at me and he goes, look, for the rest of your life, you're not going to know anything about what's going on in the Grammys. So, there were things that are influences that he didn't realize that he had, and so, when I was graduated from college, I came home, I kind of taught for a year and a half, and then I just went into the city to do music. And I chucked the whole idea of being a teacher, and that was their dream for me. And so needless to say, I didn't talk to my father or see him for my late 20s and into my 30s. When I met Kim and decided I was going to settle down and get married, I went to New York and played music. But here's the thing, and I think you finally appreciate it. I went in and I did it on my own dime. I made sure I made enough money to rent my apartment. I had a couple of pair of jeans and black t-shirts and all the guitars I needed. But I did it on my own dime. I worked hard at doing it, and I never asked him for any money. So I did it the way he said to do it, but just not the thing he said to do, right? So, and I think he appreciated that. My son and I are in a similar situation, because I've given him the sagest, most knowledgeable, experiential advice a father can give to his son. That he's got his own route, doing it his own way, and he fought back. The first time he yelled back at me when I went off on him, I was proud as hell. God, the kid's got a spine. He's going to stand up for himself. He's okay. So I keep that in my mind, okay? He's got his own way. He's going to make it, and just get out of his way. We think fathers can guide our children's choices based on our own experiences, and that's a mistake we knowingly make every time. My son is not me, as I am not my father. Today is not the same as yesterday. Sons experience life at the leading edge, not looking backwards at their father's lives. I came to a very stunning realization. maybe others have come to it sooner, but in 1990, I was 40 years old. That's the year my dad died. And we go through this kind of review of what's going on, and I said, I'm 40. I remember when my father was 40. I remember exactly what was going on in our lives. I was 14 at the time. That revelation about what similar circumstances I was now in at 40, that he was in at 40. I began to first understand my father at that point. Here I was, house on Long Island, 11% mortgage, commuting in and out of Manhattan 4 hours a day, 2 kids, 2 cars, 2 dogs, all of the things that you have to, obligations, and financial obligations, the pressure, career disciplines, all of those things. That's what my father was going through at 14. What was I doing at 14? I was chasing girls at the beach club. I wasn't doing very much of any, and yet I began to understand a little bit about what my father went through. 4 years after he died, that wanderlust that struck his father and struck him, struck me. I was working in New York City for a business form company, and those of you who remember the American Express card used to have a 3-part form. You put in the machine and you swipe it. That 3-part form was my order. My company produced those forms for American Express. That was my account. It was the largest account in the country for the company I worked at in Manhattan. It was about a $10 million a year account. It come to a point that I had reached a really terrific place, right? I was still $100 short every month for living on Long Island and all the expenses. But I was doing well. They invented this plain paper on a roll in a machine and a desktop computer. Everything that I was producing was going to be obsolete in 18 months. Literally, they just wiped the business out. So we decided we were going to pick up, sell everything, and move to Las Vegas. My wife's family had been out here for several years before we could come out, and I would start over. So I immigrated to Las Vegas. So I went to the VP that I was working for, and I said, I'm going to leave, giving my notice. I'm going to go out and try a new career somewhere else. He goes, where are you going? I said, well, I'm moving to Las Vegas. He looked at me. Now, if you know anything, we lived in Manhattan for a long time. Anything on the other side of the Hudson River was basically air and then California. Nothing existed in between. He says, Las Vegas, are you a gambling man? I said, no. I'm just selling everything I own, taking my wife and 2 small children, going to a city I've never been to before with no job waiting for me. So we came out here, and I couldn't get a job. I wanted to get into the computer business. I didn't even own a computer. So my wife's sister had a little design business. We kind of joined up with her. We started a business with furniture and accessories and stuff. And in 2 years, went through all the money from the house sale, went through the 401k, and I was broke, and the business didn't work. And I needed a job. CompuSafe stores were hiring. So I went to the CompuSafe store, and it was cattle call. They just brought everybody in at the same time, and sat us in this giant conference room, and you just sat around all day waiting to be interviewed by different people in the organization. Well, I'm a pretty impatient guy. I think I know what I'm doing, and I want to get an interview. And I need a job. I got to pay rent for 3 weeks, and I don't have enough in the bank. And there were guys getting up saying, I'm not putting up with this nonsense, and walking out, and people leaving. And I'm going, I'm not going to do this. And then I remembered my father sitting at that kitchen table on that Monday morning with the wine heads open. And remember that he went from a job as an engineer in the aerospace industry to territory salesman driving a car around the tri-state area in the Bronx. He said, shut up, sit down, and wait your turn. You can get this job because you don't have options at this point. That was my father's argument. I didn't need to be convinced of it. And I sat that whole day, went through the interviews, and eventually got the job. I didn't get it the first day. I had to go back and get it again the next day. My father's greatest influence, it's not what you do, it's how you do it that defines who you are. The fact that I went in and played music in New York was not what he advised me to do as a career. But when I went to do that, I did it the way he would have done it, on my own dime. I worked hard as I could. You know what? I didn't have enough talent to be a professional musician for the whole of my life and raise a family and do the things I wanted to do. And at some point, I had to make that decision to not do it. We came to Vegas. I got the job at CompuSafe, and I'm a pretty aggressive guy, and I learned on the job. I eventually took over the corporate sales. We had record months with them. I went on to lead a network integration company. That went under in the .com crash. I went across the hall, got a job at the Nevada Title Company. I knew nothing about title insurance. They hired me as their sales vice president. I built that company up. Then I had another opportunity to work for Tony Marnell, who built the Wynn Hotels and worked in his commercial division. Never did commercial real estate before. Did that until I got sick and got put in the hospital, lost that job. I got the Habitat job. Never built a house in my life. My brother stayed home and learned how to build a house with my father. I left at 18. I didn't even know how to change the faucet. But I was leading the company. So I always make a joke, I was never qualified for any job I got. I changed industries every time. But what did I learn? I learned how my father did it. You show up, you get enthusiastic. If you can't be enthusiastic, get out. You don't belong. Have a vision, have your own agenda for what you're doing. Because he did. And I didn't realize that until I'm going through these experiences and going, where did I get this from? Oh, I got it. One thing my father did that I won't do is that he constantly moved, bought and sold houses, moved my mother around Long Island, bought down to Florida, moved to Florida, came back from Florida, down to Florida. He always was moving around. And he did okay real estate while he was up north because he had a nice house and he had a house out in the Hamptons, blah, blah, blah. But Florida killed him. He couldn't, make any money. But they ended up in a condo down in Florida when my mom was sick with cancer, and he eventually had a heart attack. And they were alone. They didn't know their neighbors, they didn't around any family, any friends. We had to bring them back up to New York. And then when we brought my mom up, same thing. We had to put her out in a condo someplace else where she wasn't near any of her family, and she wasn't near her friends, and they were alone. My wife and I lived in one house in the middle of town for 20 years. We've been in our new little downsized condo on the south side there for the last 6 years. And, we could make a lot of money selling this house, but I have no place to go. My friends are here, my kids are here, my granddaughter's here. I'm not going anywhere, so we're not doing that. But the greatest influence, too, I think, is about family. I think you all know this in this room. I'm not telling anybody here anything you don't know. But my dad always referred to my mother as the rock. Same job, 34 years, that income was right there. Okay, so he can go do whatever he wanted. My mother said when he died, it was the hardest thing I've ever heard. He is my life. And he was gone. Mom lasted 14 more months before she passed on. My wife and I have been married for 36 years. We're devoted to each other, to our family, our home, and by extension to our community. My father had his last heart attack while he was living in Florida. I flew down to be with my mother, and my middle brother was living down there also. He lingered on life support for several days. Then it became clear that his brain had suffered catastrophic damage, and he would never regain consciousness. The decision needed to be made, and the eldest son, me, had to make it. I spent some time alone with him until late in the evening, and I remembered him as a vibrant, outgoing guy with a ready smile and contagious enthusiasm for every new adventure, be it a new job, a vacation, a new house, or simply a day at the beach throwing us around in the ocean. I realized that man was gone, and that the greatest act of love I could show was to let him go to his next adventure. I kissed him on the forehead and felt that physical touch I remembered since before I had memories. I told him it was okay to go. You're free to go toward the light. They say there's a light at the end. You don't need to worry about us anymore. You did good. I got this. I went back to the house to be with my mom, and we slept. At about 2:30 a.m., the phone rang, and it was the hospital. Dad was gone. Mom and I looked at each other, accepting the inevitable, but really unable to fully process any of it. I fell back to sleep, and as morning approached, I felt something grab my big toe and pull my leg out of the bed. I woke up. I wasn't dreaming. My leg was hanging off the side of the bed. And it was just like Vinny, my old man, to persist and be a force to be reckoned with, even after death. Dad, it's been emotional and difficult, enlightening and rewarding to spend this last month reflecting on your life and your legacy. I've not spent this much time coming to terms with your life and your death since you passed 32 years ago. Perhaps that is why I was in fear when I dreamed of you. I didn't want to accept that you were gone too soon. Just as I was realizing the life, the family, and career that you had wished for me. It really hurt me to lose you when we could have finally shared a life together that we both understood. Is that why you came to me smiling in my dream this last time? To let me know it was time to come to terms with our lives, how we are the same, how we are different. I now realize that what is good about me is what was good about you. And only the good matters, for that is what is passed down. That is what survives and endures. That is legacy. Dad, I love you, I miss you, and now I realize you've always been here. Thank you.